Okay, this is week 14. There are 15 weeks plus a finals week in this semester. Next week, we will not have a lecture. Next week, for all of my classes, there will be no lecture, and instead it will be a chance for people to wrap up their projects and any late assignments that they have. So next week, I will be having office hours during my normal class time. So I will post, we'll have an extended office hour schedule next week. So just an FYI. So no need to come to lecture next week. It'll be an all office hour. You can come to lab during that time period. And in fact, you're encouraged to do so. The project is a big deal, all right? Look at the number of points the project is compared to the number of points. I think it's approximately 30% of your grade, 25, 30% of your grade. I don't remember off the top of my head. So it's important for you to complete your project and get it in. Let me touch base on some things that will get deductions. One of the big things is navigation. Make sure that you can get from every page to every other page in your navigation. Now, there's some exceptions to this, but the navigation should be consistent on all pages. So if you have 6 main subdivisions, have a link to 6 subdivisions of your 6 separate main pages of your site. Have links to them and have them on every page. Bad code will get you deductions if you forget ending tags. Now, I don't mean if you slip up and miss a tag, but if you don't follow the pattern that we've been doing in this class and have good starting and ending tags for everything. Design that makes it difficult for the users to see. If, for example, you use blue and a blue text on a black background, that's very difficult to see. So pay attention to that. Readability, make sure you have valid, good content, all right? And make sure your content supports your goals and the goals of the people that are visiting your site. All these things taken together are what will get you your grade in your project. Now, here's the thing with those office hours next week. That is a perfect opportunity for you to show me what you have for your project and let me give you some feedback. If you can't make it during the office hours, feel free to email me before it's due and have me take a look at your project and give you feedback. It's my belief that there's no reason why you can't get a good grade on your project if you put the work in. And by turning it in, by sending it to me early, whether it be face-to-face in a meeting during office hours or emailing it in, is a good way to ensure that that will happen. Because I can give you feedback, So next week, show me what you have for your project, either by emailing it to me or showing up during lab. I can take a look at it and I can let you know what you need to correct to get a good grade on the project. That should be incentive to you to make sure that you are working on your project. I know end of semester things get busy all around. They get busy for me as well. But don't wait till the very last minute. I will be posting messages this week concerning the end of semester and when the final due dates are. I am flexible about due dates throughout the course, but there has to be a time where I say, no, you can't turn in after this point. And I will post that and instructions and about the end of the semester. I'll do that sometime this week. All right, let's go on to a few more JavaScript examples that we have. I do have another example of JavaScript validation. I think I went to W3 Schools and posted a link. Take a look at that. I won't be covering it. I will be covering how I did validation in my in one of my pages. A way that I think is maybe a little better than the way they do it with alert boxes, throwing up alert boxes. Okay. Last time, if I recall correctly, we went over this example. I think only the first one works, where you click on it and you go to the page, right? You expand the submenu. I think I went over that one. 2 and 3 are variations of that. Where you click on it. And if you take a closer look at that, you'll see I have a toggle. I do remember going over the toggle function that displays something if it's hidden and hides it if it's displayed. I have an on-click method on the LI to go and do that. All right, let's see what other variations we have here. This one I believe is the same, except I put my mouse over it and I also change the color. That has on mouse over and on mouse out instead. And I have things in the function for an on mouse over, on mouse out. This would be much better done with a function. I don't know why I included this example, but this would be better done with a function. All right, let's look at some other ones. Let's look at this one. This relates to image swaps. If we double click on this one, we end up getting a page with thumbnails and a big image. And if we put our mouse over one of the images, the larger image appears. Now let's take a look at how to do this and let's discuss how to do this. All right, so let's look at this one. All right, I have a section with an ID called thumbnails. And in it, I have 3 thumbnails. Now, I'll talk about an alternative to doing it this way. And in fact, I'll change this code to do an alternative way in a few minutes here. But in it, there is an unordered list of 3 thumbnails. I have for each image 2 images, a regular image and a thumbnail image. So this one 164 kilobytes, this one 20 kilobytes. So it's smaller, it's scaled down. I actually went into an image editor and scaled it down. Now, one real important thing to do when you're resizing images is make sure you do not affect the aspect ratio. What do I mean by the aspect ratio? I mean the height and width of it and the ratio of the height and width. So for example, if I were to open this up in, let's see what tools we have available here. I open this up in GIMP, which is a photo editing tool. This is, a very good, powerful tool. It's absolutely free. It's open source and does a lot of the things that Photoshop does, but for free. If we're going to notice this image, we look at this image, we can look at the canvas size, and the canvas size is 800 by 619. So this has sort of an irregular one. It's not quite a 4:3 ratio. There's actually a little bit extra. So what I mean by this is if I go and resize this, what I see a lot of people do is if you change this, it's automatically linked together. So if I make this 400, it'll change that number to be in proportion to it, 310. That'll keep it, the aspect ratio of it, the same and not distort the image. Now, what you don't want to do is when you scale the image, change them independently. So like maybe make the width 400 and make the height 400. All right, that I've disturbed the ratio. And if I do and scale that, then the lion looks thinner than they ought to be. That is, that's a red flag on design if you affect the aspect ratio of a design. So please do not do that. One thing that's possible to do with a thumbnail is a thumbnail does not always have to be simply a smaller version. You can actually cut out a portion of the image and use that as a thumbnail. So for example, I could do something like this. Notice that some of these, this one is landscape, this one is portrait. So I could, for example, make a 100 by 100 square thumbnail by changing the canvas size. Kind of small, let's make it 300. Since I'm doing canvas size, this doesn't affect the aspect ratio. And maybe I could just have the lion's face as a thumbnail. That's good when you have some images that are of different proportions. Make all the thumbnails just squares. That's an effective way to do that. All right. Let's look at the code. Thumbnails we have set to be 25%. Image within the thumbnail I have set to be 100%. That's 100% of the 25% of the screen. Now, and I have a maximum width of 130 pixels. Now here I've used a smaller copy of the image. I don't have to use a smaller copy of the images. It's less of an issue these days because bandwidth is so fast these days. So I could, instead of making a thumbnail, I could just use the big image as a thumbnail and just control the size. Control the size by the percentage. So this is 25%. This is 100% of that. And it won't make it smaller than 130 pixels. And I have a problem here. Restricted. Thumbnails should be getting bigger. I have a maximum width of 100. Could get rid of maximum width here. Check again. There we go. Nails get bigger and get smaller. That here would probably want to make a maximum width because you don't want these to be bigger than the image itself. So we probably would put the maximum width back in. Maximum width or minimum width is a good way to keep things from going crazy when you make your screen too big or too small. Because that's often the case. Things overlap if it gets too small, or images distort if they get too big. By using the maximum width, you can make it get bigger up to a point. And not get any bigger. Property maximum. Spelling here. Max width. Will get bigger, but at a certain point it won't get any bigger. Now, done everything but look at the actual JavaScript itself. So let's spend a second to look at that. I have on mouse over, so that's what triggers the thing. So when I put my mouse over the thumbnail, I set the document get element by ID big source equals 1 JPEG. So I find the thing on the page that has an ID of big. That's this image right here. I changed the source of it. So we're not changing something about the CSS here. In previous examples, we've said document get element by ID, something.css equals, and put in .cs or .style .something equals, and we've given it a value. Here I'm actually changing the HTML. I'm changing this attribute of the image tag. So from what it used to be, I'm changing it to 1 JPEG, 2 JPEG, 3 JPEG. Now we could simplify this by making this a function if we wanted to. We'll clean up the code a little bit. So I could create in my JavaScript section swap image that accepts an argument. And whatever argument it is, I'm going to change the big image to that. Then I would call swap image .jpg. Makes the code a little more concise and guarantees that things are done consistently. And if there's something else I wanted to do when I changed the image, I could put that in the function as well. And it still works. A little more concise code. I can then take this and put this function in a JavaScript external file and use this on multiple pages. Do 2 is pretty much the same thing, except you have to click on the image. This one changes the image and it changes the alt attribute, which is a good way to do it. And I do it through a function. So I define a new image, I define a new alt attribute. I find a thing on the page that has that ID, I change the source of it, and I change the alt attribute of it. These attributes are simply the names of the attributes of the HTML tag. So I could actually change a link to, if I wanted to, by changing the href attribute of a link, finding the link on the page and changing the href attribute. Right. Let's look at forms, and let's first do a calculation form. Here I'm going to calculate the circumference of a circle, which is simply 2 pi r. So if I know a circle has a radius of 2, then it's going to be 2 pi r, so it'll be 2 times pi, that's 6.28. So 2 times that is 12.56, if my calculations are right. There you go. So in this case, we're also changing the HTML because that wasn't there before, and now it is. And we're using JavaScript to do that. Notice also we have, if we enter something that's not makes sense, we get must enter a number. So let's take a look at how we do this. This is a button and not a submit button. The reason it's a button and not a submit button is we do not want to send this to the server. We simply want to trigger some JavaScript to occur. Therefore, we have on a button on click that will invoke some JavaScript. So if you want to invoke JavaScript as opposed to submitting it, you will use a button instead of a submit button. I have my radius here, and I have a span for the results, even though I'm not putting the result, it starts out as being empty. So right here, when I first load the page, right next to this is a span. There's nothing in it, so we can't see it, but there is a span. And what we're going to do is we're going to fill that span in when they click it. So on click, we call calculate. So on calculate is going to do a couple of things. We're going to get the value of radius. Where is the value for radius? It's in document get element by ID radius dot value. The name is what is used in JavaScript here. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The ID is used in JavaScript here. Because we're saying get element by ID. So we find the thing on the page that has an ID of radius and we get its value. That's how we pull the value out of a text box. If we were to send this to the server, the name would be what the data would be called on the server. So a lot of times you'll see if we have a text box or something like that, they'll have this exact same name and ID. Because one is used for JavaScript, one is used on the server side. So we have an if statement. An if statement is a branching statement, and if you've done other programming, you'll know it works the same here. That you have a condition, and the condition is either true or false. If the condition is true, we do this. If the condition is false, we do this. So, what is this if statement saying? These vertical lines in the middle are an or. That means that this big condition is made up of two mini conditions. And if either one of them are true, then the whole condition is true. So we use a built-in JavaScript function to ask, is this not a number? So when I type in characters there, other than numeric characters, is not a number will be true, which means that we're going to execute this statement. Also, it looks to see if the radius field that we've pulled out of the text box, if we trim it, and trim it means getting rid of any spaces before or after. So if I go and just type and fill this with spaces, then trim radius is going to be an empty string. And we get the error message, must enter a number. Now, if either of these are true, we're going to display the error message. How do we display the error message? We find the thing on the page that has an ID of results, and we change the inner HTML. The inner HTML is the stuff between the start and end tag of that ID. And we can put any HTML code we want to in here. So we could make this strongly emphasized if we want to. And it's going to put that strong tag along with that text in that HTML. Notice we get it bold. So if either of these two parts of the condition are true, if either it's not a number or it consists of nothing or only spaces, then we do this action and we display that you must enter a number. Otherwise, we take and we do the multiplication of 2 times pi times the radius and display the circumference the same way. We do and say that the circumference is, and then we add the value of circumference. Here's an interesting thing. What comes out of a text box is a text, right? Is string. It can be any character, so I can put any characters inside of a text box. JavaScript is what's called a weakly typed language, which means that, yes, it's a string, but here I'm treating it like a number. So it'll go and try to do it. It'll try to treat it like a number, right? I'm treating it like a number because I'm multiplying it by 2 values. And therefore, it's going to do the mathematical operation. Now, if we put something that wasn't a string in there, then it would blow up. That's exactly why we have this if statement here, to keep this statement from blowing up if a non-numeric item is put in there. Then we do the same thing. We put in the inner HTML, literally the word circumference is, and then we add on the value of the variable circumference. So we put that in there. So when could you use this? You could use this if the mathematics that you're doing is common knowledge. What do I mean by common knowledge? I mean that it's not a secret of my company that to calculate circumference is 2 pi r. That's just a mathematical fact. All right. Maybe if I was converting between euros and dollars, there's a value for that, and we could use a JavaScript function for doing that. Although that does change from day to day, so maybe we would want to do that on the server. We were calculating centimeters to inches. We could do it on JavaScript. Why do I say we could do it on JavaScript? Well, it saves a trip to the server, and it's not like a proprietary secret on how we calculate it. All right. Therefore, we don't have to worry about someone viewing the source and getting access to one of our secrets. Like, oh, that's the secret formula for calculating circumference. It's not a secret. Now, let's think of an example where we wouldn't want to do it client side. What if we had a quiz? An online quiz, like in Canvas, let's say. We have a quiz where you enter in either a multiple choice or you fill in a blank and you put a number in for the answer or whatever. All right. In that case, we would not want to do the validation and calculation client side. We might want to do the validation client side, but we would not want to do the calculation client side because the user could simply view the source and get access to the answers, because there'd probably be a function here to grade the quiz, and it would probably look to see if your answer 1 was 6.28, you got it correct. Otherwise, it's incorrect. So one thing that will happen, and you'll be in a better position to evaluate this when you learn about server-side scripting, is where you want to do certain calculations. Do you want to do them client-side or server-side? I guess the the guideline I would say is if it is something simple, doesn't involve database access, and doesn't involve any kind of proprietary secret of the organization, then you can do it client side. All right, we have one other example that does validation as well. But in this case, we want to submit something to the server. So I've written a form that submits to Google. So I click HTML and it does a Google search and shows that. So you could embed that in your website if you wanted to do a Google search. Now, we don't want to put nothing in here because what does it mean to search for nothing? That's not of any use. We want to save Google the trouble of getting a request to search for nothing, and we want to keep that from happening and inform the user that they didn't put something valid in here. So if they don't put anything in here, it doesn't submit. And it also changes this to be red and italics so that we're giving two visual cues that something is wrong. That way, if a person was colorblind, they still should be able to tell something is wrong because there's a message displayed, the message is in italics, and the label for the message was changed to be in italics as well. So this is validating a form before it gets sent to the server. So this is a little bit different than the first example with forms. The first example with forms, you were doing a validation before you did a calculation on the client side. So let's look at this. I have a form. My action is Google search. I have my label, and my input is called Q. If you remember back when we were when we studied forms, when we created our request, we called that element Q because that's what Google is expecting if you do a search. It expects your query to be called a variable Q. I then have a span for the air. It starts out empty, but that's where I'm going to put the air. Now, if I click the button, what happens? We're submitting the form. I have code on the on submit. And that's very important to do because there's other ways to submit a form other than clicking a submit button. So you don't want the validation right here on the submit. You want it on the actual form on submit method. Notice this says return validate form. Here's what's going to happen. This function is going to be evaluated. It's either going to return a true or false. If it returns a true, it means it's okay to submit to Google. If it returns a false, it's not okay to submit to Google. So if we return true to the on submit event, then we go ahead and we finish and submit to this page. If we return a false to it, then this blocks the submission of the page. What does validate form look like? Well, we look to see if there's nothing in there. If there's nothing in here, our return value is false because this means that the form is not valid. We put in our error, must enter something in the span that contains the error, and we change the class of the label to error. So we can actually change the class name of something That's a lot easier than changing the style of font and the color of the font and all that. We can wrap that up by just creating a style and applying that style to the air, to the label. Otherwise, we go ahead and submit it. We clear out the error message, we clear out any of the styling, we return true, and then we submit it. So if this returns true, this happens. If this returns false, this does not happen. Now, I know the examples today are a little advanced, and it requires you to know a little bit about programming. I tried to give you a quick introduction on how if statements works, and I have links to JavaScript resources that you can look and see if you want to learn more about that. All you have to do for your last assignment is take one of these examples I did, whether it be the image swap or a menu or something like that, and create a page that contains some kind of JavaScript. Or you can search on the web for your own JavaScript function that you could put on your page to do something. So you're only required to do some JavaScript on that page. Okay, let me review what I said at the beginning of the class. No lecture next week. There'll be extended office hours next week. You're strongly encouraged to see me during the office hours, or to set an appointment, or to email me your project so I can check your progress and give you some feedback before you turn it in. That will be a way for you to maximize your grade, because I'll be able to point out any problems that you have before it's due. Look in Canvas this week. There'll be a post about the end of semester, about the final due dates and stuff of that nature. All right. If there are any questions, we'll either see you next week or see you in lab.